to go live on YouTube. Okay, we're gonna go live then. Can you just stop it and not give them then nothing else? Thank you.
Let's suppose anybody, Katie, you don't have the copy of the spiel we usually about the charter communication. Well, I thought it would be here. What's it?
Usually there.
You really have all that good stuff for me.
You need a teleprompter.
Make it up. Yeah, we should have it memorized by now, but all those different charter channels and things, right. I can't keep track of them all. No? Well, we can just wing it. Just say welcome.
I have this for council. The planning commission. I could go print one out, but I have to go to that.
All right.
But it should be pretty much the same, right? It's about the charter, cable TV.
Do we have that on? Can I just point to a slide?
But this is fine, and I'll write it, Eric.
I got Eric.
Okay.
Thanks for coming to my rescue.
Planning commission, not council.
Yeah.
That's all I would say.
One of wannabes.
20. Okay. You ready? Wait. There we go.
Got a gavel.
Got a gavel. Hello, and welcome to the Capitola Planning Commission meeting of October 20th, 2022. In accordance with California Senate Bill 361, this meeting is open to the public in both in-person and remote attendance as possible. We're attending in person, and there are several ways for the public to join, either in person or to watch and participate. Information on how to join the meeting via Zoom should be on the screen right now, and it's also available on our website, cityofcapitola.org, and on the meeting's published agenda. The public can also live stream the meeting on the city's website, and as always, the meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications Cable TV Channel 8, and is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Wednesday at 8 a.m. and on Saturday the first rebroadcast at 1 p.m. on Charter Channel 71 and Comcast Channel 25. And tonight, our technician is Eric Johansson. So thank you very much for that, Chloe. And with that, we'll begin the meeting with the roll call and Pledge of Allegiance. Can we start with the roll call, please?
Commissioner Christian. Here. Commissioner Newman.
Here.
Commissioner Booth.
Here.
Commissioner Westman. Here. And Chair Wells.
Here. And now we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's move on to oral communications. Are there any additions and deletions to agenda? I know there are.
Thank you, Chair. Well, for item 3B, for the conceptual review, we've received 10 additional public comments. There's a copy of each at your seat, and those will be added to the agenda for the following meeting.
And we also wanted to change the order of the meeting and go with, you did it. You already changed it. Okay, did we also change can we also change B and C and do C and before B? Is that what you wanted to do?
That would be great if you could do that.
So the update is we updated the agenda this morning, and the zoning code update, which was the last item on the agenda, will now be heard first. The following two items will be heard at 7 p.m. We're going to first hear the Monarch Code and zoning code amendment at the request of Commissioner Newman, because he has to recuse himself, and then the last item on the agenda tonight will be the Bulb Avenue conceptual review. Capitola Road and Bulb Avenue.
Very good. Okay. Now is the time for item 2B, public comments. This is time for any member of the public to chime in on items that are not on the agenda. You have 3 minutes. If there are any speakers or Zoom attendees who wish to speak on items not on the agenda, now's the time. Do we have any who wish to address the council, committee, anybody online?
We have 2 attendees via Zoom, and neither has their hand raised.
Very good, and let's then move on to commission comments. Do any commissioners have any comments? I do.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Please.
I just have one brief one. I would like to thank the city for putting on the fireworks show again this year. I think it's a really nice community event that takes place.
And I have a comment regarding the Committee on the Environment, which had a meeting yesterday, and we had a representative from AMBAG, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, give us a presentation on coordinating climate action plans now. And we have a Capitol Climate Action Plan in place, I guess it's since like 2015. One of the things that they mentioned was, basically trying to coordinate efforts between the cities on environmental activity, specifically on reducing carbon emissions, or CO2e, equivalent carbon emissions. And one of the things I thought might be interesting to this committee or commission would be EV charging. So the biggest hitters on emissions are residential, primarily gas, natural gas, and transportation. Transportation, obviously, is CO2 emissions from tailpipes. So the notion would be, is there something we could do, like I noticed in our item today, we're going to go over the code and talk about parking lots. If there's something we might want to consider one day, or the council might want to consider one day, of changing the code or creating some incentives for EV charging stations, that would go a long way to us meeting our future goals on our climate action plan. So I thought that was kind of interesting and something we ought to be aware of and maybe pursue in the future. Okay, staff comments. Item C.
No staff comments, Susan.
All right, public hearings. 3A, zoning code amendments. Presentation.
This evening, we have Ben Noble of Ben Noble Planning to present the zoning code amendments for 2022. I just want to start by saying that we had a comprehensive update to our zoning code last year, and since utilizing the new code, we found a few items that need to be updated to be in sync. And then we also, of course, have our latest and greatest from the state regarding ADUs, so we want to bring up to compliance as well with that. And Ben Noble is here tonight to present. Thank you, Ben.
Great. Thank you, Katie. So I will share my screen. And is that visible to you?
Yes.
Great. All right. So again, my name is Ben Noble. I am the consultant to the city assisting with these 2022 zoning code amendments. And I will give a brief presentation, start with some background, and then go over some of the highlights of the amendment. So as Katie mentioned, the city adopted a comprehensive zoning code update in 2020, and it was certified by the Coastal Commission in 2021. And as we expected, once the code was adopted, we've discovered some things that need to be amended, some cleanup amendments to correct some drafting errors, to resolve some ambiguities, to improve some organization, and then also to address some new issues that have come up since the code was adopted 2 years ago. So the amendments that are before the Planning Commission tonight affect a number of chapters. They're listed here on the screen, and included in the packet are only the chapters that would be affected by the proposed amendment. So if a chapter does not include any changes, we did not include that chapter within the packet tonight. Those chapters would remain in the municipal code unchanged. In the staff report, we identified 10 topics of interest These are proposed amendments that we think are of particular interest to the Planning Commission or the general public. There is a brief discussion of these items in the staff report. And as part of this presentation, I'm going to briefly describe each of these. And our recommendation for Planning Commission discussion tonight is to go through these 10 topics of interest and the amendments that are included in each of them, and determine if the proposed amendments are acceptable or if any additional adjustments are needed, if there are any questions about them, and go through them one by one. And then also, after we've done that, to see if there are other proposed amendments that planning commissioners wish to discuss tonight and make any further adjustments to what's proposed. So that's our recommended process. So I'll briefly go through these as part of the presentation, and starting with large retail uses. And on each of these slides in the upper right, there's a reference to the page of the packet where this proposed amendment can be found, as well as the section number reference. So with large retail uses currently within the CC and the CR district, retail is a P use, a permitted use, meaning that there's no requirement for a planning commission hearing with a CUP or a minor use permit approved by the director. And also in the existing code, grocery stores are not specifically included in the retail definition. So the proposed amendments tonight is to require a CUP in the CC and CR district for retail uses 20,000 square feet or more, and then also to amend the retail land use category definition in the glossary to specifically include grocery stores. And the reason we've proposed this is because with larger retail establishments, such as a grocery store, there could be circulation impacts to surrounding uses or other aspects of the proposed use that, in our opinion, warrants discretionary review by the Planning Commission. And that's the rationale behind this proposed amendment. The next proposed amendment of interest is cannabis retail signs. So in the existing code, there are standards that are unique to signs advertising a cannabis business. And those standards limit the number of signs to 1 sign per business and establish a maximum sign area that's no more than 15 square feet. And this is more restrictive than other retail or business establishments. So the proposed amendments include a few modifications to the existing cannabis retail sign standards. In terms of sign area and number of signs, the standard that would apply to cannabis retail signs would be the same as for other business establishments. And what that is in the CR and CC and I district is a maximum of 1 square feet per linear foot or 50 square foot max. And that's total for all signs that might be advertising that business. And in terms of number of signs, the way the code currently works is that it's a little bit variable, and it's based on the sign types that are provided for the business. And generally, 1 of each sign type is allowed per business. So you could have, for example, 1 wall sign, 1 monument sign, 1 sign per awning. And that's the way that the number of allowed signs is regulated for other types of businesses. And what the proposed amendments would do is apply that same standard to cannabis business as it does to other types of businesses. Okay, so the third topic of interest. Yes.
Excuse me, Ben, are you asking for questions on each item as you go? Do we want us to hold our questions till the end?
I would recommend holding the questions till the end.
Okay.
That's okay. Okay, so third item is pergolas. So within the code currently, there's references to trellises, pergolas, and arbors. The use of that terminology is not 100% consistent, and therefore the applicable standards that apply to those types of features is in places unclear. So the proposed amendments include new and revised definitions for pergolas, arbors, and trellises. And then there are some revised standards that apply to pergolas. What the proposed amendment says is that if a pergola is attached to a building wall, it can project 5 feet into the front setback and 4 feet into the exterior side setback. We're also proposing to prohibit freestanding pergolas in the front and the exterior side setback areas and yards, and to exclude from the floor area calculation pergolas that are open on at least 3 sides. So in the glossary, there are some new and revised definitions here. A picture is definitely worth 1,000 words. This is what a pergola is. It can either be freestanding or it could be attached to a building. A trellis is sort of more of a two-dimensional sort of fence-like structure that can either be attached to a building or freestanding. And then arbor is a freestanding sort of garden structure that you could either walk through or there could be a bench in there. So these are photographs that are illustrating the new and revised definitions. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that the specific language in the packet relating to pergolas is shown on the screen now, and we're actually recommending tonight a slight modification to the language that was in your packet. You can see here in the table 1748.3 that identifies allowed encroachments into required setbacks. We have a trellis structure that was changed to pergola. And that was, I think, the relevant thing here. We want to make, or we are proposing an adjustment to that proposed language that's shown on the screen here. And I expect that during the Planning Commission's deliberation, you'll probably want to look at this a little bit closer, but just to give you a high level of what we're proposing here is to make it clear that if you have a freestanding pergola, that it is not allowed in the front setback and it's not allowed in the front yard, meaning the area that's between the front of the home and the front property line. But it is allowed in the rear setback, in the rear yard, and the interior side and the interior yard, as long as it's 10 feet and it's 3 feet from the property line. And then so we have some additional proposed language tonight that wasn't in your packet that makes it clear that an accessory structure, including a pergola, including a hot tub, things like that, cannot be within that front or exterior side yard, even if it's outside of the setback area, as long as it's between the building and the property line, it's not allowed. And so that's the current interpretation, and we're clarifying that. And then we're also proposing amendments to the accessory structure language to make it clear that structures such as a garage, a shed, a hot tub, and a pergola are considered to be an accessory structure and subject to the standards that apply to accessory structures. And so I realize this is new material, and I expect that we'll want to take a little more time looking at this more closely later. So thank you for that. Oh, here's an image that's illustrating what I just said. So a pergola or other accessory structure would not be allowed in the front setback area. But if the primary building of the home is set back from that front setback area, a pergola or other accessory structure also would not be permitted to be located between the front property line and the building, even if it's outside of the required front setback. Okay, so moving on to accessory dwelling units. So there are a number of proposed amendments to the ADU chapter, and most of them are proposed to address recently adopted state law. The legislature continues to tinker with ADU law on a yearly basis, so cities need to update their codes to be consistent. I won't spend a lot of time going over those, but it addresses issues such as permitting process, correction of violations, unpermitted ADUs, and these are all things that the city must do to comply with the law. One change to clarify existing requirements is to add language that explicitly says that establishing an ADU does not require the undergrounding of utility lines. And then there's one other change that is not required by new state law and is sort of an optional amendment that is being proposed to address some issues that have come up recently with ADU applications and to reflect what some of other jurisdictions in Santa Cruz County are doing. And it has to do with this class of ADUs that's subject to limited standards. So in state law, there's certain types of ADUs where only standards related to setbacks and height and size can be imposed by the city, and other standards related to things like design or landscaping cannot be imposed. And so one type of these ADUs subject to limited standards is an internal ADU, which means an existing floor area, say an existing home where the floor area is divided to create 2 units when there was only one previously. And what state law says is that if you have an internal ADU, 150 square feet of new area can be added beyond the existing floor area if that new floor area is used only for ingress and egress. And what the proposed amendments say is to liberalize that, make it a little bit more flexible and permissive, and to say that if you have a ground floor internal ADU that you're establishing, you can add 150 square feet on the ground floor for any purpose, whether it's to put in a bathroom or to enhance internal circulation. That's allowed. It doesn't have to be just for ingress and egress. But if you're adding floor area on a second floor, then it's more restrictive and in line with state law, allows that additional 150 square feet only if it's for ingress and egress. And the reason that this is being proposed is because staff has received some applications or some inquiries wanting to establish an internal ADU and needing a little bit more floor area in order to utilize the ADU subject to limited standards provision. This is also something that I believe the city of Santa Cruz, maybe the county, allows as well as a way to encourage internal ADUs, which is a way to increase dwelling units without substantially or noticeably increasing the size and bulk and mass of existing buildings. So that's one proposed amendment that's not mandated by state law. Another has to do with one-story detached ADUs. So currently, a one-story detached ADU that's 800 square feet or less and 16 feet or less is eligible for the limited standards only if it's new construction. The proposed amendments expand that and apply it to both new construction and existing structures. And the motivation for that is to sort of encourage and incentivize the repurposing of existing accessory structures to establish a new ADU. So that's the ADUs. The next topic of interest is parking in the R1 front setback area. So the existing code contains standards related to the subject, and it limits parking space in the front and the exterior side setback to 40% of the lot with up to a maximum of 20 feet. It allows a 14 feet width in the front setback area, regardless of lot width. But it does allow for the Planning Commission to approve a larger parking area within the setback with a design permit. And because of the typical width and configuration of R1 lots in Capitola, staff has found that this existing standard has not been working well, and proposes amendments that would allow for a 10-foot width for a single space within the front setback, or 18 feet for 2 side-by-side spaces. But if there are 2 side-by-side spaces, it would require a ribbon or a Hollywood design for these 2 spaces, where only the area that's used for the wheels is paved and the rest of it is landscaped. And then also the proposed amendments also limit the driveway apron at the curb to 14 feet. So here's a graphic that illustrates the proposed amendments. So here you have a single family home in an R1 lot. Here's the street. And within the required front setback, 2 parking spaces would be allowed for with a maximum width of 18 feet. But a ribbon or Hollywood design parking spaces would be required to minimize the amount of paving that's within that front setback area. So the next topic of interest is the electric vehicle charging stations. So within the existing code, there are standards where for EV charging stations that apply only for uses with 25 parking spaces, or an addition or remodel that increases an existing parking lot of 50 or more spaces by 10% or more. So this is really only applying, as the code is written now, to larger parking lots serving larger uses. If the EV charging station requirement kicks in, there is a standard that's requiring 1 charging station in parking lots with 25 to 49 spaces. And then if you have more than if you have 50 or more parking spaces, then you have 1 additional charging station for each 50 space increment. So this is a standard that has been in the code, I think, for a while, and is no longer consistent with state law, which is constantly evolving and requiring more as the state transitions more to decarbonizes and transitions more to electric vehicles. So the proposed amendments reflects that and removes the specific standard for number of spaces and instead references the building code, anticipating that even the standards that exist today likely will change over time. Another change to the standards is adding a limit to the size of digital screens. We're limiting it to 2 square feet, and also requiring screening on lots with 6 or more spaces. So there are some alternatives to this that are mentioned in the staff report. The city could specify in the zoning code the number of required charging stations and periodically amend the zoning code to match state law. This would make sense if the city wanted to go above and beyond what state is requiring. Another option is to codify the required ministerial process to approve these charging stations. That's not something that we are proposing in these amendments or recommending, because that's a detailed process that is probably more appropriate for the building code. And I think it's sufficient to reference the state law, the government code section that outlines that approval process. So part of the reason staff is proposing the digital screen size limitation is that there is this emerging interest and maybe even a trend to incorporate advertisements in EV charging stations, including large digital screens that display these advertisements. Staff recently received an inquiry for one of these, and because of that has found it to be a good idea to specify in the code what the rules are for these. This is an image that I pulled from a advertising industry website, sort of identifying these as the future of outdoor advertising. Okay, the next topic of interest is generators. The existing code is silent on rules for generators and whether or not they can be located within required setbacks and yards. So the proposed amendments would prohibit generators in the front and side setbacks, but would allow a generator within 5 feet of a rear setback if necessary to accommodate that generator. So let's say, for example, a home had its rear building wall right at the rear setback. That homeowner wanted to install a generator. The proposed amendment would allow for that generator to be behind that rear building line and project within the setback, but only if needed to accommodate the generator. There's also language that's limiting testing hours to daytime, as well as prohibiting freestanding generators that supply service to RVs or trailers. Okay, the next topic of interest is minor modifications. In the code, a minor modification is a type of approval that allows for a small adjustment to a physical dimension, such as a setback of up to 10%. This is an alternative to a variance where you don't have to make the difficult variance findings. And this is something that requires Planning Commission review and approval. The proposed amendment would allow for Community Development Director action on the proposed amendment if that project does not otherwise require Planning Commission review. And staff is proposing this amendment because there have been examples of recent applications where there was no other need for Planning Commission review, but the applicant was requesting a small adjustment to a setback, and it needed to go to the Planning Commission, where it was not a big deal, and it was something that could have been reasonably approved at the staff level. Okay, so I think I've saved the 2 topics of, I think, most interest to many planning commissioners for the end, and that's second-story decks and balconies and roof decks. So I'll talk about those, and then that will be the end of my presentation. So second-story decks and balconies, in the code currently, I think, as you all know, it requires a design permit. And within the newly adopted objective standards for a multifamily use that has upper story or multifamily decks and balconies, it's prohibited if it's abutting the R1 district. And so in light of prior Planning Commission discussion and direction on the subject, staff has put forward proposed amendments that would apply in the R1 zone and the RM zone that's abutting the R1, dealing with deck and balcony orientation, property line setbacks, and projection from building walls. So here's a diagram that illustrates the proposed standards. And in this diagram, the heavy line is the required second store building wall setback as it would apply on a 40 by 80 parcel. And then this hatch area is where a deck or balcony would be permitted. So anything outside of this hatched area, a second story deck or balcony would not be permitted. So here's the street. So this is the front. So the front second story deck or balcony would be subject to the same setback as the building wall. And that would be the case for the street side as well. For the rear, there would be a greater setback for the deck or balcony than what is required for the second story building wall. And then for the interior side, if there's no single family dwelling there, let's say there's open space, for example, or a different zoning district, that it would be the same as, the setback would be the same as for the second story building wall. But if there is a single family dwelling abutting the interior side property line, the deck or balcony would not be permitted on that building wall facing that adjacent property. And so those are the setbacks. There's some other rules as well that are proposed in addition to the setback. And that primarily is that it cannot project more than 6 feet from the building wall to which it's attached. So that's the second story decks and balconies. Related to that is roof decks. So within the existing code, roof decks require a design permit. And within the newly adopted objective standards, a roof deck is prohibited for a multifamily or mixed-use residential project on a parcel that abuts R1. So in the proposed amendments, they include a new roof deck definition. Such a definition doesn't currently exist. And it would prohibit roof decks in the R1 and any parcel abutting R1. It would require a 5-foot setback from the building wall closest to the property line. It would allow railings to project above the maximum building height, and it would limit structures within a roof deck only to structures that are necessary in order to access the roof deck from the building below. So that's the roof decks, and that concludes my overview of the topics of interest. So staff's recommendation, as reflected in the staff report, is to accept the presentation on these proposed amendments and to consider forwarding a positive recommendation on the ordinance to the City Council. And what we're recommending in terms of the process of this agenda item is to receive any public comment on the amendments before the commission's deliberation. And then after that, what we would recommend is to go through each of the topics of interest and for each of them to determine if the Planning Commission can support the amendment as proposed and drafted by staff, or if some modification needs to be made to it. And we can pull up the text of the proposed amendments to look at that if that would be useful to the Planning Commission. We could also revisit slides that I showed in the presentation if that would help as well. And then after we've gone through each topic of interest and the proposed amendments and disposed of each of them, to review any other proposed amendments if desired. Planning commissioners may have other amendments with which they wish to discuss or propose modification. And then that would hopefully put us into a place where the Planning Commission tonight would be able to take action and forward a recommendation to the City Council. So with that, I think I will stop sharing my screen and conclude my presentation and hand it back to the chair.
Is there further staff presentation?
There is not.
So what I heard Ben say, and I think I agree, is so what we'll do, well, first of all, I suspect that we are not going to get through this in the next 20 minutes. So the question is if we have people talking to other topics, can we halt this at 7 or 7:10 and then switch topics and then come back to it? And then if it goes too late, we can do a continuance?
I believe that's fine, that we can,
So let's see how many topics we can get through, and then if we have, and then we'll put a halt to it, and then maybe come back to it if you can. So what I like to do then is, rather than the typical sequence, which would be questions by the Planning Commission, it sounds like it'd be better to get questions and comments kind of at the same time, unless there's just overall general questions we would like to ask Ben or staff. Because then we can get public comment in, and then we can hit each topic one by one.
And then we can talk about each topic.
All right. Is everybody okay with that?
Can I make a suggestion to staff? On these kinds of issues where we have lots of verbiage, can we get a paper copy of the documents? It's really difficult to follow it online.
yes.
It would help so much. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
which
lots
would be quite helpful.
It hurts a few trees, but, you know, it helps us a lot.
And with any agenda, anytime you'd like a paper copy, just let us know.
Okay, so then let's move on to public comments on this item, on zoning code amendments. Are there any public comments?
There are 2 attendees on Zoom, and we have Nara here to make public comment. Nara, can you,
Hi there, Nara Dalbaka here, representing the Apothecarium, which is one of your 2 permitted licensed dispensaries in the city of Capitola. We're just here tonight to voice our support for the amended, the proposed amendments. It's been really hard for Apothecarium to be visible along that stretch of 41st without a monument sign that most of the other businesses in the mall are able to utilize, and we believe that it will increase the number of folks who are aware that we're here, and that will in turn lead to hopefully some increased revenue for the city, as well as for the legal cannabis businesses that you do have in the city, which are struggling right now to compete with the unlicensed and illegal ones that are operating around the state. So we really appreciate staff and their thoughtfulness on this, their communication on this with us, and look forward to being able to have the same abilities to generate or to have the same visibility that some of the other businesses do. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delbaca. Any other comments? Okay, so now we can move it back to anybody in the audience who wants to discuss this. Please come up to the podium. And I see none. So we'll move on to deliberation and questions. Let's hit them one by one. Can you bring up the agenda items again? What was our first topic?
It was pergolas.
Pergolas.
Oh, it was
Could you bring
large commercial uses.
Oh, yeah.
let's bring up the Ben, can you bring up the presentation again so we
Yeah.
can get your, there we go. There you go. So pages 109 to 23. So, are there any questions?
So what was the impetus for this?
The impetus for this was when a larger commercial use comes in. We thought it would be good for the planning commission to get review of it. So for really large, the Whole Foods came in along, something similar to Whole Foods came in along 41st Avenue. Right now it's a permitted use, and there are impacts when you're looking at circulation and access. So we thought it should definitely be reviewed by the planning commission rather than staff. The design would be looked at by the planning commission, but when you're looking at a conditional use permit, it really looks at the different impacts tied to uses. So we thought for larger uses, they should come before planning.
There wasn't anything that occurred between the time we adopted the zoning code and today that it just kind of came into your mind that.
In the past, I believe under our old code, a conditional use would be tied to larger retail. And that was
Overlooked.
I think it was overlooked. There's an exception for larger uses within the mall or within a master plan developed or master use. And that still exists within our CUP criteria. If you build a large multi-tenant commercial building, you could also apply for a master use permit in which you could get you could get some flexibility in your uses.
Speaking of Whole Foods, before Whole Foods was approved, there was an application for a PetSmart there, which was denied.
Well, I don't have any problem with the language that they're proposing for this large retail use. I think large retail uses can have impacts on existing areas, change of use, so, and it was in the prior code that we had, so I see no reason.
Everybody, so should we vote on these one by one and have a recommendation that yes, on large retail spaces, we would propose that be adopted and move forward? Because again, if we don't get through this.
Any item that seems like not everyone's agreement, I think we can do that for citizens seeing consensus.
Consensus, yeah.
All right, consensus it is. All right, let's move on to the next topic then. Cannabis retail.
I had the same question about that until I heard the public comment about what the impetus for the change was, but now I know, so.
So my question is, why bring it out as a separate item in the code at all? If it's to be consistent with other stores, why flag it as a unique item?
I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a legal use. I don't think that we want to start having different sign regulations for
Different businesses.
different businesses, whether we, it's not up to us to say we like them or we don't like them. I think they should all be treated the same.
Just part of the genesis of cannabis industry coming into communities, and they kind of tried to make it okay, but not quite okay.
And I don't know if you can zoom in a little more. So there are several standards tied to cannabis retail that towards signs. So the one request was to remove the overall square footage and the limitation of one sign. The other limitations, if you'd like to recommend removing them, is that the sign may include only the name of the business and one green cross. A. B, we've already said we should scratch because it's the maximum 15 square feet. C, where signs may not have any reference through symbol or language to cannabis with the exception of one green cross. And then C is signs shall not be directly illuminated except during operating hours. And the last standard was that signs shall otherwise be subject to a planning commission review for a sign permit application in accordance. So if you'd like to remove the standards for what can be included in the sign, just the name of the business and the green cross, and the illumination standard, we can definitely have a recommendation to City Council.
They're a legal business. I think they should be treated like other businesses.
Exactly. I see no reason to discriminate.
Yeah, I would agree.
I would agree as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
consensus.
So this would entirely remove this sign section, and the cannabis business would comply with the sign code like any other business.
We see a lot of keep on trucking figures out there with next to the green.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have our recommendation then?
Yes.
Consensus on that as well?
Yep.
Move on to pergolas then.
Pergolas, is this clear?
I have a question on pergolas. It was mentioned that an attached pergola can extend 4 feet into the side yard setback. Well, most setbacks in the jewel box, the side yards are 4 feet. So does that mean if I attach a pergola to a house, you can bring it all the way out to the property line?
Then on the pergolas, is there a minimum setback from the property line requirement?
If it's attached to the building, let me pull that up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think we want things extending into the minimum side yard setback. And if it gets closer to 3 feet, then I think it becomes a fire issue.
You can have like a shed structure on a property line. And so I would, right, instead of just a non-habitable structure, so why wouldn't the pergola meet the same type of requirements?
But doesn't it have to be fire rated on the side that's on the property line?
No, because it's not a habitable structure. I mean, if I'm correct.
Yeah, the accessory building is allowed in the side yard setback,
Yeah.
but it has to be less than 100 square feet.
Right, like 100.
So,
But
I could build a 40-foot long,
building.
if the side of my house is 40 feet long, you could build a pergola 40 feet long all the way to the property line.
Like it's a shade structure, right? So I'm just wondering, I'm sorry, go ahead, I just wanted to
So
clarify.
these are ones that are attached to the building is what we're talking about.
Yeah. And so when I presented this, I think I maybe overly simplified what the proposed standard is, and what's showed on the screen is the entirety of what's proposed. So there is a minimum distance from property line. So the front is 10 feet for a pergola attached to a building wall. So if your building wall is 10 feet or closer to your front property line, you could not take advantage of this and have a pergola that's projecting from the wall.
And interior side is
What
3
about
feet.
side yard?
3 feet.
3 feet.
Because I can't read his screen up there.
You know, you should have had a printout.
Interior side, the side that's facing another neighbor is it has to be 3 feet away. Exterior side is a 5-foot requirement.
Okay.
But it also, they're not, so no max for the rear, except that there's a required 5-foot setback from the rear
Okay.
property line, and no max for an interior side, except that it has to keep a 3-foot setback from the property line.
Okay. So you can't build it on the property line, it has to be 3. That's fine, that answers my question.
I have a question on that same page 129, that very chart, but it includes outdoor showers, where you say outdoor shower is not allowed in the front and not allowed on the side. And I'm just wondering if that would be more clear if instead of not allowed, you'd have 0 feet. In other words, if you had an atrium or some big recess in your side yard, and the deep into that recess was an outdoor shower, I would think that would be allowed, even though it's on the side of the house. I think what we care about is it doesn't project at all into the setback. And so a 0 feet would be clear in my mind. Right?
So the reason why we're adding this is we've done, a lot of our inspections, we go out and when we've been a beach town, everyone wants an outdoor shower. We've seen them in the strangest places, like in the entryway, right, not attached to a building or anything, but attached to a fence right near when you first drive in your driveway. And just the impact to a neighbor having an outdoor shower that close to their house and not tied to your house. We thought it would be appropriate to keep them out of the front yard, so there's more privacy. But yes, by putting not allowed, then it could not be anywhere in that front setback area. It could not project into the front setback area. But if there was a recess in the building, so if the front facade of the building is at 15 feet and then it's recessed to 20, that recessed area is not a projection into the setback.
Right, but according to this, it would not be allowed anyway, because it just says it's in the front, therefore it's not allowed. So that's why I say if it said 0 feet, it means you couldn't project at all into the setback, front, side, or back.
So if you'd like to switch that,
I just want to make it,
it could allow some flexibility to have showers on the front facade of a building, although it would have to be set further back.
to me, that's reasonable, especially if it's on a side yard. I mean, if you're,
Yeah, I agree with you, as long as they're set back, so they're not in the setback,
right.
then I think they should be able to have them. So it couldn't be in the front on a fence, because then you'd be in the front yard setback.
Correct.
But so perhaps staff could consider rewording that a bit. It's already done.
0
So
feet,
Ben is
no.
going to make modifications as we go.
Can you blow up his screen a little bit?
Let's see. I'll zoom in to the maximum extent. Is that a little better? I'm not quite
That's
sure what you
better.
can. Okay.
Yeah, so you don't even need the words not allowed. You just have 0 feet.
that I would say whatever you think is clearest. We're
To
we're
me,
happy to make
0
that change.
feet. There you go. Just delete that, not allowed part. There you go, 0 feet. You're not allowed any projection into the setback on the outdoor showers. Thank you. Anything else on pergolas? Sorry, I got a little distracted.
For the rest of it, I'm fine with.
Everybody else? Is it clear? Everybody
No,
happy with this?
Bewildered by it all. So,
I didn't have any,
I'll pass on this one.
didn't have any big issues on that either. So are we okay? One consensus on that one as well, it looks like? All right. I think we're still pretty good on time. Let's go on to the next. Accessory dwelling units, page 139.
I have a question on that one also.
Me too.
Go ahead, Mick.
In the presentation, it was stated you could add an additional 150 square feet for an attached ADU. And I'm wondering, since ADUs don't require setbacks, can that attached 150 square feet go into the setback area?
Yeah, so, ADUs, so the link here is that it's an existing structure. So the existing structure can be in the setback areas, but any addition to the existing structure has to comply with the 4-foot setback for the ADU, so here in the backyard. So that new 150 square feet would not be allowed to be in the setback area.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question or comment on this in general, which is, this area is one where the state is taking the lead. And every session of the legislature, they pass several new bills dealing with this, and our code is, as soon as we get it printed, it's out of date. And so, I mean, we could say this about everything in the code, that it's subject to state law, but this section is different in my mind. It's sort of because it really is a state-controlled issue. Because especially there's conflict. Capitola doesn't want us, and to a certain extent, increase densities, whereas the state wants us to. So somehow it seems like it would be good to not have to do a code amendment every year, and somehow incorporate universally, the state changes as they come through.
The one reason I would suggest that we do update the code is that we built objective standards into our code of how, when you have a secondary dwelling unit, that should be oriented towards your backyard rather than facing your, the approach should be towards your neighbors. So we've built in some standards to really protect the objective standards for neighbors, but there's so many cleanups to this.
What I would suggest, maybe Ben could come up with some language that just sort of is a general statement to the effect that as the state laws are modified and minimum standards are imposed, they're automatically incorporated in our ordinance unless we do otherwise.
Yeah, I agree, that's an excellent recommendation.
Okay, would it be just a statement that says this ordinance is superseded by?
Yeah, well,
state?
that's what Ben's expert.
In case of conflict between this ordinance and state law governs.
Yeah, that's a simple way of putting it.
Okay. We can add that.
Or do you questions?
And then as it evolves somehow, get some concept in there that the state law is a dynamic process.
Right.
Anything else on ADUs? All right, next topic. Parking. So I had a question on that one, and as you mentioned, the ribbon parking. The ribbon park, if it was just one car, the Hollywood parking isn't required. You can have a solid driveway if it was just a 10-foot driveway, right? But only when you add the second one, do they both have to be Hollywood?
That's what is proposed, yes.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that.
So I have a question about that. I don't have any problem with the 18 feet and the Hollywood-style parking. I do have a problem with it if we're going to go to a 14-foot curb cut, because then that's going to require you to drive over whatever you've got in the middle of your ribbon to, if there's another vehicle parked there, to get out. So, you know, we got examples where they showed this lovely grass growing in the ribbons or, you know, those kinds of things. That won't work if people can't back straight out and they have to constantly be driving over what's in the middle. So I could live with it all if you were allowed to have, you know,
An 18-foot
curb cut to match the driveway.
And I would suggest that it be up to 18 feet.
Right.
In some scenarios, we like to protect the street parking. That's what we're always coming up against, the street.
Who would make that?
Yeah, but if you're going to make them do the ribbons, then you can't reduce it to 14 feet. If it goes to 14 feet, then they have to have the option of having a solid driveway.
Yeah, or just have the second driveway be the ribbon and allow for, of the two, one could be solid.
You still can't.
Yeah, you would, well,
Yeah.
you're right. You still couldn't do it.
So if you're going to do 14 feet, you get a solid driveway. If you're going to do 18 feet, you have to do the ribbon driveway.
Require artificial lawn, and then it won't get hurt when it's driven over.
Yeah, but not everybody wants that. I mean, I think the idea is for it to be a permeable surface, not put down plastic and more plastic on top of it.
Or you can use the blocks that the lawn grows up in the middle of.
Well, I guess the issue you're bringing up is what's more important, the size of the curb cut or the permeable surface / landscaping associated with the ribbon. And so it's like, you know, you're saying it's got to be one or the other. You got to pick what you think is more important.
The other solution I've seen in other places that once you cross the sidewalk, some areas they'll do maybe like a solid strip of pavers that's about 5 feet deep, and I'm now realizing why. Maybe the reason behind that is so that as you turn in, you're on a solid surface, and then it goes to ribbon. But throughout Cape Cod, you always see that design. So.
Yeah, I would just say you have we give people two choices.
Okay.
And then they could decide if you want to have the two spaces, then you need to do the Hollywood style driveway, but you get a curb cut that allows you to back directly out. And if you want to do, you know, solid driveway, then you only get the 14-foot wide.
But Katie's point is that we want to have an opportunity to review the size of the curb cut. So if you're going to automatically allow an 18-foot curb cut, then if there's a parking issue, then we won't get a chance to review it.
But I guess, you know, we give away parking all the time. On Hill Street, we got rid of the parking on one side of the street to have a bicycle lane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we get rid of parking in the village so that we can have the outdoor dining out there. I mean, suddenly we're going to pick on one particular person because their neighbors don't want the street parking to go away. I mean, how are we going to decide who gets to regulate the street parking? And maybe you could have it come to the planning commission and they could regulate that, but I don't think it's something that.
I think in the neighborhoods, especially in the North 40s, in the Jewel Box area, not so much in Cliffwood Heights, but where parking on street is at a premium, an 18-foot curb cut just eliminates that, some of the parking. So, you know, I think the size of the curb cut is more important than the ribbon parking.
Okay, so you're saying let's go get rid of the ribbon parking, but stick with the 14-foot wide curb cut.
I'm saying leave it just like it is. Require ribbon parking if you're going to have two side-by-side spaces, but a 14-foot curb cut.
That doesn't particularly work for me, but that's okay.
So, okay, so, but perhaps the compromise then is what Katie suggested, which is a ribbon parking doesn't have to extend the full length of the 20 feet parking space. That last 5 feet. So the second,
Solid.
right, the second unit where you'd have to do the swerve out could be partially paved. I don't know.
Maybe since we're gonna continue some of this, we could continue.
The standard as it is just requires the planning commission review it and approve it. So to go beyond the 14 feet of width. So if you'd like to review each of these individually, knowing that there is a balance that has to be made between street parking and driveway parking, we could scratch this suggestion.
I think that's a non-issue, personally.
Yeah, that works for me. I think we should scratch this one.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good with that too.
Yeah, that's consensus. We're not going to move forward with that red line.
So by scratching this entire parking in front setback amendment is not moving forward?
Correct. We'll go back to the language that we had.
So one of the concerns with the existing language is that the 14 foot, the dimensions as it was previously written were not working well for typical lot sizes.
So we always had to review them,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to review them.
Okay.
We'll continue to do them.
Okay.
Peter, it's 10 after 7. You want to?
Yeah, I was going to say before we move to the next question, maybe we should talk about switching topics for a bit since we have a large audience.
Would we get halfway through?
We got through the easy ones. I don't know if we got halfway through.
Yeah, we're gonna need to come back another session, I think.
So would you like to continue this to the next planning commission on, I think it's November 1st?
December 1st,
Or
November 1st.
November 1st, because this is a special meeting.
So we have it.
Okay, November 3rd, or would you like to
I think we should
finish this at the end of the evening?
I'm okay with coming back to it.
Well, I'm not gonna,
You want to leave?
and also, I mean, this is gonna be a long public hearing.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we should continue
Let's
to
continue it.
November 3rd. That gives us time to really study it. Maybe we could get a paper copy so we can
Yeah,
see it.
that'd be a good idea.
Okay.
We don't need the ones that we've already had consensus on.
So I'll make that motion. We continue it to November 3rd.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to continue this item until the next meeting, November 3rd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. It's unanimous.
1 hour at a time.
Okay, so let's move on then to,
Yeah.
so you wanted to do Monarch Cove in next. This should be short, those of you who are waiting for Bulb Avenue. So we'll move on to item B, project number 210267, Monarch Cove Inn Code Amendments. Do we have a staff presentation?
Thank you, Chair Welcome. Good evening, Commissioners.
Uh-oh.
What's that? Van Risk, my favorite person. Here we go.
Apologies for that. So this item is policy amendment for the Monarch Cove Inn property specifically. And what we'll be looking at tonight is the zoning text amendment, zoning map amendment, and then corresponding general plan land use map amendment. This only affects 3 properties in the city that are currently zoned as visitor serving. Just the basic request is to bring that into alignment with some adjacent property to the Monarch Cove Inn and have that be an R1 zone with a visitor serving overlay. It's kind of like the village has a visitor serving overlay as well. To some extent, this is a rerun of the comprehensive zoning code update that both the Planning Commission and City Council adopted in the 2020 and 2021 time period. And when this was forwarded to the Coastal Commission, the subtopic of the Monarch Cove Inn was discussed pretty extensively. The owner made some statements about both their personal and financial circumstances and their ability to continue running the Monarch Cove Inn, needing some flexibility to manage their estate going forward. They did have some positive comments from individual coastal commissioners, but the coastal staff was ultimately they pulled this item out and asked for it to come back under separate consideration. And so that's the effort here this evening is to run back the local process in order to get it back to the Coastal Commission. And the coastal staff also asked for additional financial documents to support the owner's statements about feasibility. So that's also included here in the staff report. And so again, the specific request is just a change to allow residential use. And the owner also talked about their attempts to reposition the property and the scale of the property currently, and some of their attempts to bring forward proposal to increase the property number of rooms, and they actually had 2 of those, 2001 and 2013, and both of those were met with substantial opposition. They feel like they're in a bit of a position where they need to have a change in policy in order to move forward with this property. This is just an example of the map. Just be a simple change from purple to yellow with an overlay. And then as far as the text, it would just pull from, there's actually a Monarch Cove chapter that would get rolled into the visitor serving overlay. And so going forward, in order to transition to residential, they would need a use permit. And with regard to the financial documents, the Coastal Commission staff recommended that the city commission those directly so that they'd be independent analysis. It included a feasibility study into profitability and ongoing costs, and a broker's opinion of value, which is essentially appraisal. And so they looked at under the various land uses what the property be worth. So the next step would be for the commission to forward a recommendation to the city council, and then ultimately the city and the owner would be joint applicants by the coastal. What we're asking for is consideration of these proposed amendments, offer comments, and forward recommendations.
Are there any questions of staff by the commissioners? Okay, let's open this up to public comment then. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this particular item? Please come forward to the podium. If not, we can reach out to the Zoom folks if there's anybody there. Okay, seeing no one stepping forward, let's move on then to Planning Commission deliberation. Anybody wish to comment on this?
Aren't we expecting the applicant on this?
We were, and they knew 7 p.m., so...
Not seeing the applicant here, I just met them today.
Comments or a motion?
This, seems like deja vu, really. We went through all this, and it's kind of become, us against the property owner and the city against the Coastal Commission on this issue. So now what we're saying is we're going to, move a change that is being requested by the property owner and do battle with the Coastal Commission over that.
So the Coastal Commission was not opposed to the project to the change when it went before them for certification. However, they wanted more information, so they didn't want to pass it at the same time as our big zoning code update. So that's why we've gone ahead and done the extra studies. We've been communicating with Coastal Commission staff. So it was really, they made the point that we're not saying to go away. We will consider this, but we need additional information. So it did take, we wanted to bring this along with our code cleanup and our zoning code just to put it all into one package, but it is a separate application from the applicant. State all the costs associated with the additional study.
Strikes me, it's almost an illegal taking of property by the Coastal Commission, denying someone the right to live in their own house, how they choose to live. I would move approval of the
I've watched this property for so many years now. It's always seemed so marginal as a commercial enterprise to me.
I'll second Mick's motion.
So there's a motion to approve by Commissioner Ruth and a second by Commissioner Westman. Any further discussion?
We need to do a roll call vote.
Let's do that then, please.
Commissioner Christensen. Aye. Commissioner Newman.
Aye.
Commissioner Ruth.
Aye.
I think the applicant,
Okay.
just arrived.
Commissioner Westman. Aye. And Chair Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Let's move on then to
Let's inform Mr. Blodgett what he just.
Yeah, he might have helped his case by coming late.
So we just passed your item. So it's gone to the next step forward.
Thank you guys very much. Okay.
Yeah. You're good, Bob.
Congratulations.
We were speedy.
It wasn't very controversial as far as we were concerned. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're done.
We want to go.
Well, you're welcome to stay for the next item, which is 3720 Capitola Road. And with that, let's move on to our staff presentation on that item.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, I'm going to have to recuse myself from, just for the benefit of the public. I do this because I have an economic interest within 500 feet of the property site. So under the law, I'm not allowed to participate in this, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
All right.
Very good.
See you November 3rd.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Commission. Before you this evening, we have a conceptual review for 3720 Capitola Road and 1610 Bulb Avenue. The conceptual review is for future annexation of the 1610 property, 1610 Bulb, and a conceptual review of our first community benefit application for the city. The proposed community benefit is a senior living facility. A few slides just to orient you of photos of the current view. So this is from the corner of Capitola Road and Bulb looking towards 41st Avenue. There is a structure behind those trees that is, this is the old dog kennel location. And here's across the street from Bulb. Next, this is and the rear of the property. And then this is 1610 Bulb Avenue property here. And on this slide, I'm going to go into first the details of the annexation request. So 3720 Capitola Road is located within the city limits. 1610 Bold Avenue is located in the county and is a residential property. In order to annex the property into the city, it must be located within the city's sphere of influence. Our sphere of influence is quite large in Capitola. As you can see, it's the red dotted area that includes all of 41st Avenue all the way to the ocean, as well as the majority of Pleasure Point. Something I will be bringing back to you probably in the next few years, as LAFCO has reached out to us about our large sphere of influence, and if we don't intend to annex these areas, we do need to revisit. Next is our zoning code map, and I've highlighted in the area in which this property is located, and this is zooming in to the zoning code, or the zoning map. The Capitola boundary is shown with the dashed black line. The property is shown outlined in red, and there we go, 1610 Bold Avenue. So it is within the sphere of influence. What I'd like you to notice here is this jagged property line, or city boundary we have in this area. If I go back to the zoning map, it's really pronounced in this one area, how in and out it goes. So if it were desired by the Planning Commission to see the annexation move forward, and we're looking at an annexation as well as the community benefit, but I just want to point out that it would be in alignment with Pono Grill next door, Pono Hawaiian, and then the Chinese restaurant next to that extends even further back. So it would clean up that jagged edge along that road.
Are the two properties in the same ownership?
My understanding is that there are two owners, but they're, one is owner of both. There might be a partial ownership of one.
Okay.
So this is our first community benefits application to come through the city since this new section of code was adopted. The purpose of the community benefit is to establish incentives for applicants to locate and design development projects in a manner that provides a community benefit. They're intended to facilitate redevelopment. The area in which these incentives are allowed to happen within Capitola is along 41st Avenue and Capitola Road, an area that we're hoping to see redeveloped in the future. We also have this chapter is also applicable to the theater site in the village, because that is another site that we'd like to see redeveloped. The incentive is only granted when they're fulfilling, going beyond a requirement of the code or going beyond what's required by the state. It must significantly advance the general plan or substantially exceed the city's minimum requirement. So if someone were to bring in a community benefit, the allowed incentive is you can get increased floor area up to 2.5 and increased height from 35 feet up to 50. Our code outlines specific community benefits that qualify, and the list is here. I'm going to go through a few of them, but open space, public infrastructure, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, low-cost visitors serving, transportation options, historic preservation, public parking, green buildings, public art, child care facilities. So those are allowed community benefits. The applicant is applying under number 11 for other community benefits, and these are other community benefits that are proposed by the applicant that are significant or substantial beyond the normal requirements.
So who determines if it qualifies under that number 11 category?
So it's the Planning Commission and the City Council. The requirement is the first step in any the conceptual review application, for any community benefit application is to first come before Planning Commission and City Council, and it's the Planning Commission and City Council that have to, it's a non-binding input, so it's not a decision, you're not voting tonight, but it's as to whether or not the request for incentives is worthy of consideration. If you find it to be worthy of consideration, You can ask for modifications and give guidance. This is the first step. This is not the actual application for the development. Questions with that? Second step is that they would resubmit an application that would be reviewed by the Planning Commission for a hearing and recommendation of the City Council, and the last step is it would need City Council approval. So the two-step public review process. There are 5 findings tied to community benefits. First, that must provide a substantial benefit to the community and advance the goals of the general plan. There must be adequate public services and infrastructure to accommodate that. They've provided letters from the county and the water departments and let us know that there's adequate services. The public benefit must exceed the minimum requirements of the zoning code and any other provisions of local, state, or federal law. There is no requirement for assisted living within our code, so that's for that alone they can't meet our requirement. It minimizes adverse impacts to the neighboring properties to the greatest extent possible, and also it enhances coastal resources. Those 5 findings that must be met when such projects would go to the submitted to the Planning Commission. Tonight we have Greg Irwin here to present. Yeah, why don't we, you have did you email? Okay, I've got to go into my email really quick, so I'm going to stop sharing. Coffee Ortiz, he's going to begin the presentation, I believe. I think it's in our typical format of PowerPoint. So is this okay, Rafi? Please go. Sure.
Yes, and a PowerPoint. So
So really, this is just a short introduction to the Pergolas project. Really, our intent here is to provide a little bit of context and background. To introduce Greg Irwin, who leads the architectural firm.
Could you speak directly into the microphone so we can hear it up here?
yeah.
Thank you.
And then to introduce Greg Irwin of the architecture firm Pergolas Associates to explain a little bit more our thinking on design. Let me just introduce who's working on this, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So my background is I was raised in Santa Cruz and teamed with a developer who's built over 250 housing units throughout the county. What we've done is we've searched for the best operators. And so we found Irwin Architects, which is probably the best architectural firm for senior assisted living housing in the state. From an operator standpoint, we've connected with Paradigm Senior Living, which operates senior living facilities throughout the country and actually has experience doing it in Santa Cruz County. So there's an economic reason for doing this, and I'm going to get into that. For me, very personal. Flora Jean Ball was my grandmother. She lived actually across the street from here next to the fire station. She would take me to St. John's Episcopal Church on Depot Hill. She sold her art at the Craft Gallery in the village. And her plan was to live at home and die in her sleep with all her family around her. It turns out most of us want that kind of. And it didn't work out for her. And the reason was, well, what she didn't plan on, what most of us don't plan on, is that she became a bit debilitated. No matter if you're living at home, needed real assisted, the kind of care that in an assisted living facility. At the time, we realized that she needed that. We reached out to those facilities and learned that there was a waiting list. It turns out most people don't plan for this kind of thing. There was a waiting list. There was no availability. And what happens in that situation is you then get kicked down to a skilled nursing facility. So if you've ever visited a skilled nursing facility on North Road, I encourage you to visit it. I've been to every one in this county. My grandmother has been to most of them. Her life ended in one of those. And so I'm thinking a lot about my parents, for whom this project is probably too late. I'm thinking about myself, thinking about a lot of people who would like to live at home, who will need a different kind of housing, and a kind of housing that there's not a great deal of in the county. So we'll go through that in a little bit of detail. So let's talk a little bit about the market demand. We define market demand as a primary and secondary area. The primary area is that in which 80% of the units would be occupied by people within a 7-mile radius. So you see that sketched. And the remaining 20% would come from the adjacent neighboring areas. This chart's a little hard to see from this distance, but the main point is that the fastest growing segment of the population in Capitola is the age group 75 and over with an income of $50,000 or more per year. It is the fastest growing segment in the city. And those people need housing. The nearest facility comparable to what we're contemplating is Aegis. They're currently at 100%. So really, there are economic benefits to this, but I want to highlight that I think by far the most important is that the intention is to provide housing to people with this kind of need. Assisted living is something that is becoming a big topic around the country. Seniors generally aren't here in these kinds of venues with application zones. They're homebound or they're close to ending up in a facility like this. So really, the benefit that we're really talking about is housing for a segment of the population that's fast growing and that needs assistance if they are to stay in their local community. If not, then they're looking at alternatives outside their immediate community or maybe even further away. The rest you can read for yourself. An 80-unit facility, which is what we're contemplating, would employ approximately 70 caregivers that have a payroll for those course. And a developed property like this, of course, has no tax revenue. Again, this is really about providing housing. This is a chart that you can read, but one of the things that we looked at in talking to people was, what is the level of traffic that a facility like this generates? And so we looked at projects of comparable size, and I'll just state the obvious, but residents in these facilities do not own cars, don't travel. Their families visit them. So really, the traffic families. So if you look at traffic flows, and here's where I might need Greg's help in explaining this. If you look at traffic flows, we compare this to office buildings, which are generally considered low tax facilities. And by sort of time range throughout the day and the evening, what we see is that the traffic generated generally corresponds to about half the traffic load that you would see in office parks. What I'd like to do is let Greg Irwin walk you through some of the design considerations that he came up with, and I'll let him take it from here.
Thank you. So let me start by saying senior housing, unfortunately, is one of the only development products that doesn't have a right of use in any city in the United States. There always needs a CUP. Sad thing. What we're coming here tonight is actually kind of a multi-piece thing that we have to bring together at once. So we're looking for the annexation, first of all, of the piece to the front piece, which then matches the property as described previously going down the street. So we have an unknown here, right? We're starting with an unknown design factor of will it be annexed or not. So we designed with the statement, if not, what can we put on the lot? So we look at splitting it into two pieces. The rear property for parking, the front for the assisted living. It is, parking is not even a one-story building, it's less intrusive to an exact neighbor than the allowed three-story building. How we can be as neighborhood as possible. Because of that, that's why we're coming here with the added ask for the fourth floor, because we are not building any stories in the back half of it. So, as I said, we've got to bring these kind of in tandem, a design with the annexation. But we also designed that if the annexation doesn't happen, that we can then separate out the two pieces. Our hands are somewhat tied to what we can bring to you and how we bring it, because it has to come together. That's where we'll come from. Here to answer whatever questions you or anyone else here has tonight. And know that this is kind of the first step of bringing this to you. These two pieces, we're project, additional ask for the floor and the annexation. So it's actually three different pieces here we're bringing to you at once. No way to separate them. Thank you.
I would like to go over the slides and.
Yeah, so we can, so I think it, the back parking lot there matches the depth of the parking for the restaurant next door. That's where that comes from. We have a parking lot there in the back that we circle and enter the building from there. Capitola Street, we created an outdoor patio to bring the residents to the street and have an outdoor become part of the community. We look at all the goals of where Capitola Boulevard, from the planning standpoint, is looking to move, and we're trying to address as many of those items. This is front entry, little courtyard, private courtyard for the residents also. First floor is assisted living, dining room, and activity spaces. Second floor is a memory care floor for those that need help. Anyone needs more descriptions between assisted living and memory care? First floor again would be assisted living.
fourth floor.
The fourth floor matches. Four-story, residential-ish piece. Architecture always gets interesting when you have an architecture style and it's always unique. You want it to be as residential and homey as possible, but you can't compare a house to a cedar. A little uniqueness to that. Red rooms there.
Thank you, Greg. Any presentations?
I have two.
Okay.
Couple more.
While you're calling those up, can I ask a question? Does this affect our arena numbers?
This would not affect our arena numbers because there are no kitchens proposed in this assisted living facility. If there were beds and kitchens, then they would count towards arena numbers.
Peter, while we're waiting for Katie to follow, I have a question for the applicant. Have you done any preliminary traffic analysis, number of car trips per day at all? Nothing? Okay.
One other part of this is the applicant, when you come in for a community benefit application, you're required to give a description of your proposal, and you're also allowed to bring forth site plan and design, although not required. The applicant brought forth the site plan and design and was given the option to start preliminary design feedback. It was not required, but knowing that if this were to move forward as a community benefit project, it would give them adequate time to start working on the design. So they opted to move forward with that. We hired RRM Design to do the review of their project, and they gave us a great memo that has a lot of design feedback attached to it. I have that available if we want to go there, if you want to reference it tonight. I have some slides of the RRM has taken the elevations and pointed out a few changes that they would recommend. It's really up to the Planning Commission on how, if you want, I think it's most important that we get through the community benefit aspect of this discussion tonight, but if you'd also, when you're making comments and giving feedback, like to comment on the design, there was definitely items that need to be addressed. One other thing of note is the current design doesn't quite fit with our allowance. It's at 53 feet, the maximum is 50, so that would have to be decreased in order to comply with our allowed benefit.
But
there's a few other things that don't quite comply in terms of there's one missing parking space, it doesn't have adequate bicycle parking, but those are all things that I did not want to add additional cost to this project until that we, for revision and modifications to their design until we've gotten through the public benefit piece. So they're aware that there are items that will need to be addressed in an official application, but at this time they have preliminary design review comments from RRM and zoning comments from staff.
Question about that 53 feet. So this is going to eventually go to city council, right? And so if they chose to leave it at 53 and not cut it down to 50, we couldn't approve it, but city council could override us, right?
You know, I would need a legal determination on that because the code is specific in this zone to be at 50 feet, and I would need to check our variance allowances, if whether or not we prohibit variance.
I'm just thinking about the apartment buildings and Malone Gyres, they're going.
That would be under a development agreement.
Different.
So very different because there's a whole different set of rules.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, our recommendation tonight is to provide the applicant with feedback on the annexation request and as to whether the request for incentive is worthy of consideration for the community benefit proposed. And then if there is general support for the community benefit, any design feedback would be welcome. I also just want to point out in the staff recommendation, feedback on the annexation and whether or not the request for the incentive is worthy of consideration. It'd be good to get feedback on both if you, if it's one or the other or both, so I appreciate feedback. That will hear the public.
Are there any other questions of staff from the commissioners? Okay, then let's open this up to public comment. This is a chance for the members of the public to speak on this particular item. You have 3 minutes per voice, and if you want to come up to the podium to speak on this, that would be great. And we would. Is there a sign-up sheet on the podium? We would like to. Generally, we'd like to have you sign in so that we can get your name in the minutes spelled properly. So, are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear it a little bit back there. My name is Susan Seeley, and I'm a resident on Long Avenue, 1475. And all these people here are from Long Avenue. They are coming to support me, and I'm not really good at this, and I don't have all the studies, but I have tried to address what these gentlemen have said to us. So I'm going to read real quickly, and I can get off course here. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. Does the proposed plan exemplify the substantial benefit to the community? I question some of their figures. Their facts are 15% of the Capitola population is 65 years of age and older. That's me, and I said approved. And that's 1,539 people, and they say they need this facility because they don't have enough. What they didn't consider is the fact that a lot of these people own their homes. And they're going to do everything they can to stay in their home. If they have to remedy, they have to make additions, add a ramp or whatever. And there are federal grants, and I know that the city of Capitola supports everybody improving their homes so they can stay in their home. And so home ownership, 47.7% of people own their homes according to the 2020 census. Senior living in poverty is 70% according to the 2020 census. Seniors will do what they can to stay in their home. And this is an important fact that was just available to me. The number of seniors who live with their family, the oldest fashioned extended family, the 2020 census shows that 47% of that 1,539 people, which is 725, live with their families. Point not considered, which their argument was just made, which is not enough facilities. Well, different studies say there's between 18 and 29 within a 9-mile radius of the Capitola area. I have a chart, but the little dots where they are. And that includes a couple of and Scotts Valley. And there's also the Westwood Memory Care Center, which was not mentioned, in downtown Santa Cruz. I'm not sure of the capacity on these. I don't have that research knowledge, but I know they exist. And also, at 3245, right across the street from this proposed facility, is an assisted living facility, which one of our friends lives in. So, the question, does this develop at least the highest and best use for the community? And is it a substantial benefit? There are people who say no.
You need to finish up. You have 3 minutes, and your 3 minutes is about up. So if you could kind of summarize.
Go ahead.
Peter, I do have a question. Are you representing all these people and you're the only one speaking?
No, all wrote letters.
But are you the only one speaking in this group? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go back. Okay. The location is flawed because of the whole ingress and egress is on Gold Avenue, which is totally unacceptable because of the street. The street has no sidewalks for people to get off the street in case of emergency vehicles. and the street is narrow, there's parking, so the density factor is going to be major. So all in all, I'm going to go back to my last point, that the location is more flawed than the facility. So that is taking up too much traffic density and bringing too many trucks and things into our area.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Marilyn McCown. I built my house on 144 Avenue when I was 7 years old. I've been there since. The entire time that I have lived there, I've never reached Old Avenue until just like, so, I have a letter there to address the traffic issues, but it's another big concern. I'm a homeowner resident at 144 Old Avenue, and I have concerns with the proposed development. In the 45 months, I have lived here, I have watched as our street has become too small for the traffic that passes through. Most of the time, there isn't room for 2 cars to pass, so we must wait like a one-way street. Seeing as the proposed development calls for ingress and egress on both avenues, this is going to significantly impact the residents. In the median, it isn't possible to turn left on Capitol Road, which would direct traffic right down both avenues. And I want to make a note here saying that we're going to have employees that would be working there. We're going to have people coming and visiting the residents. It's going to hugely impact the traffic flow down an already too small street. Not to mention the fact that, there's no school buses anymore. The little kids are walking to school. There are many, many kids that walk to school. Parents are all working. And that's an added danger to the children, I feel like, with more traffic. This could be remedied by blocking off Wall Avenue just past the parking lot, so there wouldn't be cars coming up and down our street. I think that would be a reasonable accommodation. Wall Avenue should not be affected by this project. Changing the property to the city of Capitola does not change the fact that this is a residential area that barely accommodates the residents that it currently has. We have one more question too. I would like a clarification of how this project is going to help the coastal resource enhance. I don't see that. I'd like some clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. So before we have the next person come up, and you can go ahead and come on up, but while you're doing that, I just want to acknowledge that we did receive many letters, and we all had an opportunity to review those. So we appreciate your input, and we have had a chance to review them all. So. No, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll repeat what you guys probably already got.
There were 10 letters.
My husband and I have been there on both avenues since 1996. He was there a little bit before me. And we've been working for years and years. It's not out there. Always working on it. We finally got it pretty well nice and made. And so my idea of living there and retiring, because we're both just retired, I don't want to live across the street from residential. My other concern is there are way too many cars on that street. And no 2 cars can drive down that street. It's insane. And half the streets, most of the streets do not have sidewalks and gutters. So everywhere we've got slides going down that street. So if you're going to have wheelchair people coming down, where are they going to go? And then we have dog walkers with a lot of people. So those are my big concerns. I love the idea of a new assisted living. We need that. But I just don't want it on my residential street. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Vic Klauser. I live at 1360 Old Avenue. I've been there since 1986, so I think it's about 10 years. As my neighbor was saying, a lot of us have made improvements on our properties over the years. slowly fixing them up as we can afford it, beautifying our curb appeal as best we can. We're proud of it. And it's happening more and more on hold. So we have a lot of investment of heart and money and hard work in our home. I know that people can take the approach of not in my backyard, but I will tell you from personal experience, my mom and dad are 96 and 95 years old. They're still living. They were in ages for almost a year. Couldn't afford to keep them there. I'll tell you that prices for a facility like this are not cheap. There are not many people in Santa Cruz County that can afford that. They are paying upwards of $12,000 a month there. They're doing so well, we had to move them out, think something different. I'm applying for VA benefits for my dad, who's a World War II vet, and hopefully that'll go through. That's a side note, but my question to you is that at what point would you consider annexing this property because of the tax-based revenue that you would receive from it over the needs of our neighbors, of my neighbors here? The last gal who spoke is absolutely right, and she says if you look at the double line going down our street, it's crookeder than a dog's leg. You can't even, it's not straight because it's just all over the place and it's not wide enough. And you can barely park, as she said, cars have to wait for each other to come by. We're already experiencing high volume of traffic coming from the mall. People want to avoid 41st Avenue. So Old Avenue is the shortcut to get down to Bromer and then over to 38th and wherever you want to go. So I just wanted to put that question to you directly, to please hear our hearts on this. It's not that we're against, I'll speak for myself. It's not that I'm against this kind of housing, because I know people need it. We were fortunate enough to move my parents into an apartment where, as a family, we can hire in-home care. It's a lot cheaper, and we're saving them thousands of dollars a month. So I beg to differ with you on the use of this, and I will tell you also, as this gentleman said, his grandmother would have liked to have in her own home. My parents, too, they were so glad to get out of there because it was depressing for them to see people that were not doing well and deteriorating in front of them. Is that my time?
Yep.
Okay.
If we have a last sentence or two, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Klauser. We need volume control on that.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Russell, and I've lived at 144 Gold Avenue for my entire life. And I have watched it go from a tiny little residential street where I rode my bike and there was never any cars. And now it's just constant. There's constant traffic coming up and down the street. They're going so fast down our street because they're trying to take a break from Capitola to Bromer. So they're trying to get where they're going as fast as they can. So that's been a big issue with the idea of how much traffic is going to come and go. That being said, I do want to make kind of a point of what Nick was saying about how I really don't have a problem with the senior living facility being put. It is a huge need in our area for affordable housing for seniors. And I don't know where I would like to see the sources of the numbers of seniors going up at 50,000 plus a year, because the seniors that I know that are on fixed incomes through Social Security are pulling maybe 30 per year. I would also like to see how much per month they are charging the residents to stay there, to prove to us that this is something that our community can actually benefit from. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like they're trying to get the highest earners in this luxury senior housing development, which is what they called it, into a small neighborhood.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Anyone else?
And people at 1475 Gold
Avenue. I didn't really come prepared to speak, but I did send, email, but as I sat here, I felt like I really needed our voice to be heard in the sense that obviously we're a very tight neighborhood. I mean, we have grown, established relationships. We're a really solid community. And the more and more I looked at the plans, I just was becoming more and more concerned about how this facility is not really impacting Capitola. We are the ones, as residents, being affected. There's not an entrance to this facility in Capitola. It would be 1610 property, which is residential, that would be the entrance to this facility. To me, that's wrong to even think that it's right to consider a residential space and turn it into commercial. So I really would like them to think if you're wanting to have something, have it on the Capitola area. That's great. We're knows this. That's great. Entrance. Why are you taking a residential street that's highly impacted? We have so many families. My boys are out playing basketball all the time, but they're right. The line doesn't even go straight down our street. It's crooked up by where the top of the facility is. Obviously, they had no idea. They walked around and they put mailers in our mail office. They didn't even use the postal system to send out flyers about this new development that they have. So I just think it's a lack of respect for our community, and I feel like our voices need to be heard because it's really going to impact us on both ends, the residents. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Scott Lawrence. I live at 1574 Grove Avenue, which is directly next door. Bought my house 26 years ago. All I know was a house. Now it's a business. I have to deal with people playing ball in the parking lot and coming to my yard to get their frisbees and the baseballs and they come over the fence. I have to deal with people sitting in their cars listening to loud music. Now they want to annex this last residential buffer that I have and turn it into a parking lot right next door to my house. I'm against the use of the property, I'm against the size of the property. That's the impact of the traffic that's going to be on the street. Every time a new project is built, it impacts my property. This is huge. The last residential buffer I have. Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence.
Please remember to sign in when you come to speak.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes. My name is Donna Jensen Lewis. I live at 1472 Gold Avenue, and my concern is primarily with emergency vehicle traffic up and down our very narrow street where we have lots of kids and animals out. I can only imagine with senior living facility that there's going to be lots of emergency vehicle traffic coming and going. I just can't even imagine what that would be like on our tiny little street where we are saying that our cars can't even pass each other, much less emergency vehicles. It also, I think, really detracts from what's already been mentioned about our residential community that we have established. And when I look at the criteria for the community benefit, I am having a really hard time seeing how this meets any one of these 5 criteria. When it was being read, in my mind, I just don't see a connection there where it's meeting these criteria. So those are my primary concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
I'm Christina Shear. I am a resident and not a resident. I've lived in the county since 1973. And when I sit here this evening and I hear of a project
I should say a permit that could be issued because it's for the community betterment. I think to myself, is this like things that have been occurring in Santa Cruz County? Instead of people applying for a commercial permit, the application is for commercial to this type of facility. If these people apply under the category of community betterment, does that give them the tax break? And it seems as though they should be applying for a straight commercial application. All I want to say, because I feel that I looked into the ownership of these properties and where the people are. There's a Delaware corporation, a lot of other things going on. And I really feel that the Planning Commission should further investigate what the tax incentives for this group is that wants to build projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shear. Anyone else need to come up and speak on this issue?
Valby, at 1447 Gold Avenue. And aside from pointing out the substandard width of Gold Avenue and the fact that you really can't drive that street without crossing over the double yellow line already, it's not just the width, it's also the intersection at Capitola Road where the site distance is substandard. And so you can't, especially because of the AT&T building there, you really can't see very far down, and that makes it pretty dangerous pulling out onto Capitola Road. And I want to point out that that has increasing traffic on that. It's not a good thing.
Thank you. Well, the next person's coming up. Katie, do we have jurisdiction over Bulb Avenue? County road, isn't it?
It is on the county.
No. So just for the audience's benefit, any comments that you have about the quality of the road, you need to go to the county. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Michael Price. I wrote a letter, so I'm going to repeat it here. I live at 1479 Ball, so I'm here to speak on behalf of my 2-year-old daughter, Gwen. Believe it or not, she's asleep, and she couldn't make it tonight. So, we've been on Ball for 2.5 years. That's probably one of the newer residents, and we feel like we struck the lottery here by finding such a quiet and safe and welcoming neighborhood. The traffic is one of my main concerns. Traffic, noise, property value over time. Like a big commercial complex there. But most importantly, safety. My daughter loves to go and play in the street with our neighbors. It's a very crooked street. That's why we as it is. It is still a somewhat quiet place most of the time. Workers at this new place, ambulances, deliveries. That would be an exponential increase of traffic flow, and everyone else who said what's already heard.
Thank you.
My name's Jason Wagnermarsh, and I live at 1366 Gold Avenue, and I've lived there since 2019. And just like you were saying, I also have young children. I have a 17-month-old son and a 3.5-year-old daughter, and every day we take them on walks up and down the street. My daughter's trying to ride the bike, and my main concern is, there's going to be more traffic. There's no sidewalk going down along the street, so for me, it's a big concern having more cars coming up and down the street. Not a place for the kids to get off the street. And,
Thank you, Mr. Wagemarsh. Anyone else?
We do have, two hands raised in Zoom. Were you able to unmute? Sure. Rachel, I'm going to allow you to speak. Go ahead.
What are you gonna say?
Hello, my name is Rich Oas, and I live just behind this facility on Terra Court. This is the first I've seen of this proposal, and I'm a little concerned about the front design. If it's a memory care facility and there are people that are allowed to go out or visit with their relatives in front, it seemed like there's an opportunity for one of these people to walk away and roam the neighborhood, which I'm within that block area of the neighborhood. But more importantly, at the back of the facility is where the emergency vehicles will come in with their sirens blasting, because unfortunately, these type of facilities have a lot of visits from emergency vehicles. And so we're going to be hearing lots of sirens coming in off of Bulb into the back of this facility, where they should be coming in from the front, where you have a shopping center across the street, and the noise wouldn't be such an issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's good.
And we have Jennifer. I'm going to allow you to speak.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Gallagher. I am at 1505 Bulb Avenue, where I have been with my family for the past decade. My first concern is over the annexation in general and just the inequity that my neighbor Angie spoke about. I am a resident of Live Oak. I cannot vote on the Capitola City Council, where if this moves forward, the planning department and others will be having that power to move or deny everything to do with this project. So a project that would affect me and my neighbors so greatly, we have no power or no voice over as Live Oak residents. So I'm very much opposed to the annexation in general. And then beyond that, when I look at the presentation slides that were presented today around the community benefits, the first one was that local residents would stay in the community, which I also really have a hard time believing based on the price point of this development. The second is the payroll and property tax, which does not seem to meet the standards of number 11. And the third was the sales tax and tourism revenue noted for visiting family members, which seems like very much a direct contradiction to being told that we would not have traffic or parking impacts or a lot of people coming and going if one of their community benefits is supposed to be tourism revenue. So I just want to really strongly voice my opposition to this project moving forward. Thank you.
Ms. Gallagher. One more?
What do you think?
Lisa, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Is that me? Oh, great.
Go ahead.
I'm 1550 Bulb Avenue. Actually, I've been here since 1977, so.
Teresa, can we get your full name?
Larissa Stolaroff. I lived here since there were cows where the Capitola Mall has been. I would like to voice, please don't make this annexation happen, because it's the last demarcation of a residential line on our street versus the commercial. If you don't annex, then what is put in the place where the Capitola Kennels is actually has to conform more to the size that would be more fitting for our neighborhood. Clearly, all the parking and driving issues have been stated, and that's a big concern. Noise is a big concern. Size is a huge concern. How much is that going to block our light and our trees and change the whole environment of our street? So I'm so happy our neighborhood has come out together to really voice our concerns, and we really, really hope you consider not annexing 1610 and keeping that residential.
Ms. Paulo. That it?
I don't see any more hands.
Any more members of the public? Last chance before we bring it back to the commission. Okay. We've had our public comment. Now it's time for planning commission deliberation. Anybody want to start?
You want me to start?
Go, Nick, go.
Okay. When the whole idea of community benefit came up several years ago, at the time the zoning ordinance was being adopted, and I believe was put into the general plan, I objected to it at that time. I still object to it because I think it's an end run around our zoning regulations, and it's so subjective that it just depends on who's in power to determine whether there's a community benefit or not. So I'm a hard sell on the community benefit. And if you could put the criteria up for recognizing the community benefit.
I'm going to want to see that too.
Yeah, I was struck by number 2 and number 4. I'll be honest, I've lived in Capitola for 60 years. I've never driven down Bulb, and I never have because it's such a substandard street. It just doesn't look like you should drive down it. So I have a really difficult time with that criteria that there's infrastructure to accommodate. And I also have a difficult time with number 4, minimizing adverse impacts to the neighboring properties. So it's going to take a lot of convincing to me to make those 2 findings to give a community benefit here. Someone mentioned blocking off Bulb to stop the traffic from coming down it on that one side from Capitola Road. But that's such an inconvenience for the neighbors. If you guys want to access anything near 41st, you have to go all the way out and around to get there. So I don't think that's a real solution. Someone else mentioned the number of emergency benefits, or not emergency benefits, I'm sorry, emergency vehicles that may occur. I don't know if any of you have the Pulse Point app on your phones or iPads, but if you look at the Pulse Point app on a regular basis, and I live somewhat near Pacific Coast Manor on Wharf Road, the number of calls they have at that facility, and that's an assisted living facility, it's all a rehab facility, it's incredible, the number of places they have there. So I think that would have to be something that would possibly be addressed for the ingress and egress if this were to be approved. What else do I have here? No, I think in our general plan, one of the statements in there, one of the guiding principles is to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods. And even though this neighborhood isn't in the city, it's in our sphere of influence. And those 2 things, this project and that statement, seem to be incongruent to me. So I'm having a difficult time. I mean, it's going to take some real convincing to me to support the annexation, and because the city has to be the lead agency on that, I believe.
The applicant can be the lead.
They can? Okay.
But they need the city's, a letter of recommendation from
Yeah,
the city council.
our stamp of approval. So yeah, I'd have to have some serious convincing to move forward with this in its current configuration.
Thank you. Quick question, Katie. The annexation, if it was annexed, it would be annexed commercial, and currently it's residential. Is that how that works?
That's correct. So you could not have a large parking lot on a residential site, so therefore, the only way to make it work under the current configuration would be to annex and
Very good.
it'd be commercial.
I had a quick question for staff. In the applicant, he was saying that the fourth floor was to compensate for dedicating the rear lot for parking. If the annexation wasn't an option, he was saying that there would be two. What would be the other option? I don't understand how it would, with the trade-off.
So, if it was not annexed, it could only be developed under the county code as it stands today. So I think you made a reference to, I think the point that the architect was making was that if it were annexed and became commercial, they could do a 3-story building on that lot. And so they're asking for the 4th story on the front lot, and in order to not put any structures on the.
My turn? Well, as usual, I agree and disagree with some of Commissioner Luke's comments. I think the community benefit has to be a real benefit to the community. And while, because in my other life, one of the things I do is I'm a hospice volunteer. So I go to all of these facilities weekly. And I know there is a huge, huge need in Santa Cruz County for more assisted living locations, more memory facilities. But I also know that that need is not just for more facilities, but facilities that are affordable for the seniors in our community who need them. So if I was going to consider something like a community benefit, someone would be saying to me that they were going to make a certain portion of this affordable. They might even be saying that a certain portion of this was going to have kitchens in the room, which would help us with our arena numbers. They would come up with a design that was, compatible for the area that it was going to go in. We now, I think a couple of years ago, looked at a project to redo the Capitola Mall. And one of the items that they proposed was having a residential that I believe was 4, maybe even 5-story that abutted Capitola Road. And when that project came in, the community clearly indicated that having something that size abut Capitola Road was not appropriate, that we would need to have designs where the building was stepped back, that there was some public access in the front of it. So while I'm not completely opposed to the idea of changing some of our regulations for community benefit, for me, this project hasn't gotten to the point where I could say, yes, I think there is a community benefit. I mean, there would have to be some, changes in how it's set up, managed, operated, as well as the design of the project. I have great empathy for the people who live on Bulb, because I do agree with Commissioner Ruth. Until this project came up, I don't think I've ever driven down Bulb, because it's just not one that you look at as a shortcut street. It would be imperative for this project to, figure out how to deal with, the traffic and the emergency vehicles coming in and out. To date, we really don't have any information on how all of that's going to work. So to sum it up, as far as community benefits, there needs to be some changes. I don't think the size of the facility and the way it's being approached right now with just parking in the back and a big 4-story building coming up to the sidewalk on both Capitola Road and Bulb Avenue works for me. I have a little different opinion on the annexation. I think for the city to annex that property would be a good thing for the city of Capitola. And I'll tell you, I'm here representing Capitola, so, you know, I want to be sensitive to what you need, but also what the city of Capitola needs. Because I think this site is ultimately going to be developed. And some of you were here when we talked about state laws and housing and density earlier this evening. It is going to be possible under the new state laws for someone to come in and put a 3 or 4 story apartment building on that site. And so I think having a little larger site that people can work with ultimately would benefit Capitola and also ultimately benefit the people who live on Bulb. So we could have a design that would work for all of us. So those are my comments at this time.
Thank you. Courtney?
I very much agree with Commissioner Westman. I think annexation would benefit Capitola, and I do agree that there could be a very large building put on that lot. I think my overall impression with the entire building design is really most what impacts me, is that I don't think that the community is going to benefit from a 4-story building. And there isn't enough information provided for traffic and ingress and egress to really understand how it's going to affect the neighbors. I just think more articulation where the mall was concerned. It's very similar how it affects the overall streetscape. I think it just more a second pass at it with more information.
Okay. Hey, Katie, can we look at that other slide that showed we give a waiver?
That was.
No, but it had to do with the public. You had a list that had all the things like public parks or
The allowed benefits.
Allowed benefits. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so that's how I looked at this. I said, well, what they're asking for is a waiver or a variance to the code. So I said, well, why? You know, I've got no objection to creating a assisted living facility or, you know, any business as long as it meets code. And so I say, well, all right, what are the reasons for allowing a variance? Well, okay, so the general plan and the code is pretty clear on the kinds of things that we should consider. And boy, I'm looking at this list, and it does this doesn't seem to fit at all. I mean, something that, you know, really invigorates 41st Street, gives us better transportation, more green building, public parking. To me, it's I was struggling to see where this would fit. And other community benefits, to Commissioner Ruth's point, it's like, well, that's kind of a catch-all. And so I want to say, well, in the light of items 1 through 10, does this kind of fit in that spirit? And I just didn't see it. So my attitude was that I don't feel that I have justification for allowing a variance, irregardless of how I love the design or, you know, everybody in the audience loves this. It's like, I don't think it meets the criteria for a variance, just as a bureaucrat. With regards to the annexation, I was impressed with Mr. Lawrence and felt that the people of the county it's like taxation without representation. We're going to come in here and change the code and make something commercial where it's been residential, and all of a sudden we're like the bully coming in and saying, no, we're going to annex this, and, you know, to heck with you guys, we're going to have this 4-story building bearing down on you, and sorry, you're not part of Capitola, so tough luck. So I don't like that aspect of it either, so I'd be against the annexation. So I don't know, what else do we need to do here? Those are kind of my comments. Do we need to vote on something, or just?
There's no vote, this is non-binding.
Can we take a vote? We can certainly take a vote.
I think
I'd like to have the planning commission go on record with a vote that it doesn't meet the criteria for community benefit.
I'll pull up the slide, but pursuant to the code, and we really need to follow the code, the conceptual review provides the applicant with non-binding input from the City Council and Planning Commission as to whether the request for incentive is worthy for consideration. I'm hearing a bit of a split, a 2-2 split on whether or not this is worthy for consideration. It sounds like it hasn't really met anyone's bar at this point, that additional work would need to be done and additional information. But I've now created a list of all of your comments. All of your comments will go forward to the City Council as recommendations. And the City Council will be meeting next week on Thursday at 7 o'clock, hearing this item. I will include in the packet all additional items, all additional letters that were included. I've got 10 new letters that came in today and the additional information for the applicant. So all of that will be in the packet, published tomorrow, along with the summary of the Planning Commission's direction on this feedback. So.
Yeah, and my comment again to the audience at large is that my experience with the City Council is that they're very good about reading all the inputs and all the letters. So, all your inputs will be appreciated.
It doesn't hurt to be there, though.
No, definitely be there.
Yeah.
And hopefully they listen to the commission.
All right. Is there anything else on this item? Okay. So we'll move on then to, where are we? Commission Director's Report?
First of the November meeting, I have no new information.
All right, and with that, are there final commission communications of any kind? Any last-minute announcements or discussions? Okay, meeting is adjourned.